we don't want to invalidate ourselves because, first of all, it feels like crap, but also it just makes the feelings bigger. So we want to be able to name and notice our feelings and validate that, you know what, it makes sense that I feel this way. This is super valid. And from there, we want to work with the emotions so that we don't get stuck in them. Because while we do want to feel our feelings, we don't want to get stuck in a place of like them flooding us and overwhelming us. And I will say there are some feelings where we need a little bit deeper work, like grief or rage. There's another one that's really intense, despair. Those three especially. Sometimes the regular skills we use, we need to bolster with additional ways of working with them because those can tend to get stuck longer. Whereas most other emotions, without... Hi, I'm Jen Barnes, and you're about to experience how to ditch the old ways of doing things, embrace your neurodivergence, learn tips and tricks to function optimally, and love yourself, neurodivergence and all. Welcome to the Self-Loved Woman podcast. Hey, it's Jen. If you're a lady ADHD entrepreneur and you're tired of the struggle, you're tired of just getting by, you're tired of having these ideas that you struggle to put into fruition, and you're ready to finally step into the role your business and your life needs, I've got something for you. This August, I will be launching my ADHD Women Entrepreneurs Kickin' Ass program. I'm accepting only 10 foundational members so that you'll get personal attention and support so that you too can tap into today's strategies that today's successful entrepreneurs are using to grow their business, reach more people, and create more impact. This is so essential for us women with ADHD because it can be hard enough just getting by and functioning. But to really build a business that thrives, we need support and we need to know the right tools. To sign up to be among the first notified when this doors open to this program, click the link in the show notes. I look forward to connecting with you soon. In this episode, we'll discuss the 5 steps for helping yourself navigate this neurotypical world as an ADHD woman entrepreneur. So if you have ADHD and you're finding yourself kind of just getting by instead of truly thriving, this episode is for you. Hey, it's Jen. I'm excited to explore the 5 steps that we need to do to be able to truly be neurofabulous, to be able to thrive in our business and in life. And so I wanted to talk about this because I made a Facebook post on shifting the narrative from I can't because I have ADHD or this is not going to be possible because of my ADHD towards something that's more realistic. Sure, our ADHD can be a factor in how we do things, but it doesn't have to mean that we can't. It oftentimes means we need to find our own unique way of doing it. And that's what these 5 steps are all about. The first step that I'll share today is really getting to know your ADHD. And some of that is understanding that while ADHD can be challenging, it's not all bad. And there are ways that we can harness our ADHD, the creativity that comes with it, to figure out how to get ourselves to function. A lot of times with ADHD, we think that we're bad or we've been shamed a lot of our lives, especially if we weren't diagnosed till later in life, to think that we weren't doing it right or that we're not good enough. And those messages have gone deep for a lot of us. So the first step is really uncovering those messages that are often getting in the way of our success. And whether that's our business taking off or really truly making money, or if it's our relationships, other things in our life, just even maintaining our household sometimes. So the first step is really working on that mindset. The next thing we want to do is work on regulating our nervous system. And a part of this involves working with our emotions. With ADHD, we often have very big feelings. A lot of us are what people would call highly sensitive, which I actually think of my sensitivity as a superpower now that I know how to work with it and not let it take over and control me. And in a recent episode, I went over the autonomic nervous system and how this works. But briefly, we have 3 parts of our nervous system. One that tries to help us connect with others, the ventral vagal system. Another one where we flip into our fight or flight response, which is protective. And a third where we shut down when it feels like all hope is lost. And the thing is, a lot of times we can be bouncing back and forth between those protective states of fight or flight and shutdown, especially with ADHD, but especially if we hold trauma. And trauma doesn't have to be like big, awful things happening to us. It can be the challenges of navigating this world with ADHD and all that negative criticism and feedback. So one of the things that we need to make sure that we're doing in order to function well is working with our autonomic nervous system so that we can get regulated. And it's not about being regulated all the time. It's not about being in that safe enough to connect place all the time, but it's about being able to come back from something that triggers us or something that pulls us into our fight or flight response or shutdown response, noticing that we're there and then bringing ourselves back. This is an essential piece to being able to truly function with ADHD because we can't think clearly with a dysregulated nervous system. We're not going to be able to focus with a dysregulated nervous system. Our best work won't come out of us from a dysregulated nervous system. A lot of times we can be like a fire hose to people when we're acting from a dysregulated nervous system. I know at least I can be sometimes. And sometimes we're just fire hoses anyway because we have ADHD and that's just what happens. So the deal is we need to work on working with our body and our thoughts and our feelings to help us be able to come back from those places of being triggered, back from fight or flight or shutdown into a more regulated state, which sometimes looks like calm, but it doesn't always have to be like, I'm a yoga teacher, so I have my yoga teacher voice that I try not to use because I think it's annoying, right? So I'm not talking about like ventral vagal has to only be, our inner yoga teacher, but rather it's us being in flow and being able to come back to that over and over again when we get pulled out of it. And I will say with ADHD, I think it's a particular challenge. And I will tell you one of the things that has helped me more than anything with that, besides yoga, yoga's been helpful, is meditation. And I know with ADHD, everyone's like, I can't meditate. And there's that can't word again, right? I will tell you I've been meditating with ADHD for, since I was 24. So 25 years now. And yeah, my thoughts are busy, but we have to remember the point of meditation isn't to stop your thoughts or clear your mind. There's many purposes for meditation, but a lot of times with ADHD, we're just trying to practice being present. And so, there's ways to meditate that can help us actually build our focus. There's really solid research that shows even after 12 weeks, we're able to build the part of our brain that pays attention and be able to focus better. Even in the ADHD brain, which I can attest to, my focus used to not be quite as good unless I was hyper-focused on something of interest to me. I remember in high school reading those history textbooks because history was not my jam. And just like I would fall asleep. I even fell asleep in history class, especially Soviet Union. And it was just because it was just not interesting to me. And it was so hard to focus. What I found in graduate school, now granted, most of graduate school I was very excited about because I wanted to be a social worker and most of my classes were about social work and how to help people. So that was interesting to me. But there were still some things, like the history of social work. Some of that was fun and some of it was really dry. And what I noticed is, two things. One, because I'd been meditating at that point for, probably 5-6 years back then, I was able to actually stay focused while reading. There were still some times when I was rereading pages, but it was better than it was when I was younger and reading something that wasn't super interesting to me. Also, another trick I did when I had to read something that wasn't interesting to me, when you're in graduate school, you don't have a ton of time, especially if you're working full time. So I would use the elliptical trainer at the gym, and I trained my eyes to be able to read while I was on it. And that helped me be stimulated enough to actually enjoy it. Or maybe not enjoy it. Enjoy is a strong word. But be able to focus on it and learn from it. And there's research, I believe there is, I don't want to misspeak, but I believe there's research out there that talks about how much more deeply we can learn things when there's movement involved. Certainly when there's emotion involved, but I believe movement is a piece of it. At least that was certainly my experience. So getting back to things that help the nervous system, meditation helps so much. And the reason it helped, one, is because I was able to have that practice of like, oh, I notice I'm dysregulated, and just bringing myself back to whatever's going on, right? Or I notice I'm unfocused, bringing my focus back to the object of meditation. But also in the sense of just having more self-awareness, just being able to notice when I'm off the rails. That was a huge game changer with meditation. So I could go on and on about meditation, which is not what we're here to talk about today, but that is one of the tools that I used that was really, really helpful. Yoga was another one, really helped me regulate my nervous system. And I'll tell you, daily exercise helps too. This is a lot of stuff to dump on you. You're like, how am I going to get all this done if you're not already doing it? And there's ways to get ourselves to do stuff that I'll talk a little bit about later. It's some of my favorite stuff to work with clients on is how do we help you be able to get yourself to do these things that will help you and that maybe you even know will help you. So a piece of this step is regulating our nervous system. The other piece that is very close to this is working with our emotions. Like I said, a lot of times we have very big feelings with ADHD, and so we need to be able to work with them. And that does not mean like, oh, it's fine, or I'm going to look on the bright side. Or, I saw another creator speaking to a commenter she had who was like, ADHD is a superpower, because she was talking about some of the challenges of it. And, there's that almost toxic positivity or blindness to the challenge that I think that kind of statement, whether it's about ADHD or our feelings, if we're feeling angry or sad or hurt or frustrated, discouraged, disappointed, all the feels, right? We don't want to invalidate ourselves because, first of all, it feels like crap, but also it just makes the feelings bigger. So we want to be able to name and notice our feelings and validate that, it makes sense that I feel this way. This is super valid. And from there, we want to work with the emotions so that we don't get stuck in them. Because while we do want to feel our feelings, we don't want to get stuck in a place of like them flooding us and overwhelming us. And I will say there are some feelings where we need a little bit deeper work, like grief or rage. There's another one that's really intense, despair. Those three especially. Sometimes the regular skills we use, we need to bolster with additional ways of working with them because those can tend to get stuck longer. Whereas most other emotions, without fueling them with our thoughts, they actually only last about 90 seconds. It's only when we fuel them with our thinking that they go on and on and on, right? Now, granted, some of those other three that I mentioned, as well as trauma triggers, that might be a different story for another day. And if we can notice those feelings come up and work with them, sit with them, and then figure out what are they trying to tell me and move on from there, then instead of our emotions controlling us, our highest self is in charge and we're able to be like, what really needs to happen here? Yeah. So that's another super important piece. Third step is getting focused. And this is no small thing with ADHD because focus is part of the deal, right? Our brains don't function the same way. Our executive functioning isn't what it is in a neurotypical person. And so it doesn't mean we can't focus on things. It means that, first of all, we want to really prioritize what we need to focus on and then use tools to help us be able to pay attention to that stuff. So the first part of this step is getting clear on your priorities. Like, what are your values? What are things that mean a lot to you? What are things that you really, want from your life? And what are things that you absolutely need to do? We have big priorities, like life priorities. Like, my family is a very large life priority. Supporting myself is a large priority. Continuing to learn and grow is a big priority. And a lot of those tie in with my top 3 values. So if we can get clear on that and then let everything else trickle from that. For example, the other day, I can't remember what I was going to look up, right? We do these research rabbit holes. It might have been about Sinead O'Connor and like some of her top songs and just, a deep dive. And while I honor her and her work influenced me so much as an older teen and young adult, it is not one of my priorities or aligned with my values to be an expert on like famous people or, musicians. It doesn't mean that her life didn't matter. It doesn't mean that her life didn't impact me. It doesn't mean I don't value her. It doesn't mean that I'm not sad about her death. But it does mean that I don't have to spend an hour and a half researching the life of Sinead O'Connor, especially when I have 2 businesses to run and other things. And in the free time that I do have, there's other things I'd rather do. I'd rather be seeing my family. I'd rather go to tap dance class on Wednesday nights. I'd rather, connect with people over gardening or talk to my neighbors across the street. And so it's not that things like, Sinead O'Connor's death aren't important, but it's how much time and energy we put on something like that maybe isn't our top priority right now. And a lot of times we do it to distract ourselves and to help us procrastinate. But when we catch ourselves doing that, remember, if we're meditating or doing mindfulness practices, we build our self-awareness. So when we catch ourselves doing that, we can be like, oh, I'm down a research rabbit hole. And this isn't what I need to do right now. And then we can shift our focus to what really does matter. And there's ways to do that for sure that I love to share. Not in our podcast, I share it in my program. And there's ways to do that I teach in my program. But for now, just knowing that if we can get clear on our priorities, notice when we're off of our priorities, and then bring ourselves back, that can really help us focus better on what matters. This breaks down. So as an entrepreneur, you likely have a lot of things that you've got to get done. You likely also have a ton of ideas because, right, our ADHD brains are super creative that you have a really hard time bringing to fruition. And this focus is a part of it. So if you can get clear even on your daily priorities and keep track of them, and then when you're focused on some other thing, like, for example, I remember a time when I was scheduling a webinar and I was like, oh, okay, I need to set this up in Zoom. And when I went to go set up in Zoom, I realized that I hadn't updated the description. And then in Calendly, or in like the Zoom area. And so I was like, oh shoot, I got to go do that. So I opened up my email to see what I had put the description as in some other thing, like what I had emailed an assistant. And I was like, oh, okay. But then while I was in there, I saw that a client had emailed me that I'd been wanting to get started with, like helping them, and was like, oh, okay. So now I need to respond to them. And then I respond to them, and then I see another email come up that reminds me that I need to update this other thing. And so I'm just like chasing this list of tasks instead of actually getting the original thing done. I don't remember what the original thing done was, right? That's what happens. So what we want to do for each day is get clear on our top priorities. And when we catch ourselves being unfocused, we say, is this a priority? Is this what I need to do right now? Does this need to be done ever? And if so, we can jot it down. Like I keep a notepad right by me so I can jot that kind of stuff down. But another question to ask is, does it need to be done by me? It's really important with ADHD, especially, that we learn how to delegate more so than others, because sometimes things can take us longer. Sure, there are creative strategies we can use to help ourselves do stuff. But the fact of the matter is some days our energy is going to be lower. Some days our focus is going to be less attuned. And so if we can really get clear on what we personally need to do, both like deleting what we don't need to do and delegating what someone else can do, then it makes it easier to focus on those things that actually have to get done. So prioritizing, huge piece of focus. There's also other tools to help improve our focus. Like I mentioned in the last piece, is mindfulness practices. The present moment check-in, something I teach. I think I shared it on TikTok, so check that out. But there's lots of ways that we can build our attention and build our focus. And just remember, when we're practicing mindfulness or meditation or whatever it is we're doing, the point isn't complete serenity now. The point is for us with ADHD, when we're doing these types of exercises, is to build our attention. So Jon Kabat-Zinn talks about, he created mindfulness-based stress reduction. He talks about in his book, Wherever You Go, There You Are, that part of what helps us build our attention is our inattention and noticing that we're not focusing anymore. Because it's the process of noticing, oh, I'm not focusing on what I'm supposed to focus on, and bringing it back, that actually builds that ability to focus. So this is a huge step, being able to get ourselves to focus. There's a lot of different pieces here. The next step is boundaries, which I'm sure is no shock. With ADHD, I don't know about you, but boundaries are tough because we're just like, oh, here I am, yeah. And some of it is boundaries with, info dumping and oversharing. And, like I just spent 20 minutes talking to the guy at Caribou Coffee, who is this sweet 20-year-old kid, and he's awesome. And it was like, oh yeah, that's awesome. And it was fun to connect, so it was worth my time. Probably overshared a little bit. And we can do that, but we can also not have boundaries with tasks. Some of that is boundaries with other people. And I've noticed, at least in myself and a lot of the clients I serve, that because we are trying to make up for our ADHD, especially before we knew we had it, we end up doing a lot of people pleasing and a lot of, yeah, I'll do that for you. I'll do that for you. And we do a lot of things for a lot of different people until we fall apart and crash and then can't do anything, even our own stuff. Sound familiar? It does to me. So anyway, if we're getting into this pattern of doing too much for other people, then we're not going to get our own stuff done. This is why that last step, getting clear on our priorities, is really helpful. And there's lots of different ways that we can communicate our boundaries with people. It doesn't always involve the word no. Sometimes we can still help them, but not by taking it on ourselves. Maybe pointing them in a direction where they can find that information. One of my favorite new ways of handling, I have a person in my life who used to, I don't know that this person does this anymore, but used to ask me a ton of questions that were very easily Googleable. Googleable? I don't know if that's a word. And after a while, I was just like, I don't know. I would actually have to Google this myself. Why don't you try Googling it? Because it was actually the truth. I didn't know. And I don't want to have to take time to look this up when you can look it up yourself. So that's even a way that we can help, is sometimes saying, I don't know, and letting people figure things out for themselves. We also need to get over the fact that sometimes people might be mad at us when we say no, especially if they have been benefiting from us always saying yes or always doing stuff for them or even doing things a lot for them. Because they're no longer getting what they want. It's not that they personally hate us. I mean, if they do, then that certainly tells us about the quality of that relationship. It's more about most people are just upset that they're not getting what they want anymore, and they're trying to get us to go back to giving that to them again. And once they realize, oh, this is not going to happen anymore if you're consistent in maintaining your boundaries, then they stop hounding you about it or pressuring you about it, and they're just like, oh, this is what Jen does, right? So those boundaries with other people are really, really important. But there's one most important boundary, I know I've talked about it in another episode, that us ADHDers miss. And it's the boundaries with ourselves. Some of this has to do with focus, but we see something that's shiny, or we're having a rough time, so we want to go buy stuff or eat a ton of stuff or whatever it is. And we're not having those boundaries with ourselves. And our impulsivity can make all of this so much harder, but it doesn't mean that we can't learn how to do it. Certainly, I will tell you, meditation has helped. Mindfulness has helped. The reason it has helped is it creates space between the stimuli and response. Like the more I meditate and do yoga, the longer I've been doing it, the longer I have between something that is stimulating me in some way, triggering me, whatever, to responding. And I can even tell when I'm not as consistent with my meditation, that shrinks a little bit again. So it's really important to be consistent. So that's just one way that we can practice working with our boundaries on ourselves. The last step that I'll share today is learning how to get stuff done. And this is a big one with ADHD and how our brains function. We know some stuff about the brain. There's so much stuff coming out about the brain that we're learning. Neuroscience is a very young science. So I think there's still a lot that we don't know about the ADHD brain, and hopefully that will be coming out here. Even over the next decade, I'm sure we'll see advances, and especially in women, because it does look different for us than men. But we know right now that our dopamine levels and our norepinephrine levels are lower, or we have less access to those things than the neurotypical brain. That plays into our executive functioning. It plays into our focus. It also plays into our motivation to do stuff. So we've got to find a way that works with our ADHD to get ourselves to do stuff. One piece of it is knowing your motivational tendencies. So some of us are motivated externally, some are motivated internally, some are both. And there's different ways to work with each of those different types to be able to get stuff done. We also need to be creative in how we get ourselves to do things, how we tackle things. Another piece of it is being able to identify those things that interest us that we want to do, and delegating things that are less interesting to us that we don't want to do when we can. So that way we're not having to fight it quite as often. So one of the first things that I will be outsourcing as my income increases is cleaning my house. Seriously, probably one of the first things, if not the first thing around my house, will be having someone clean my house. It's just like a fight every time. And that just sucks the life out of me having that fight. And so if I can get clear on that is something that eventually I want to outsource, or if you've got kids and you're the mom and you do everything, teaching your kids how to do some stuff for themselves, not only will that be good for you, but truth be told, a lot of times when you're not teaching your kids how to do stuff because you feel like you got to do it all, you're robbing them of being able to learn how to be a responsible human in the world. You're robbing them of those learning opportunities of how to get themselves to do stuff that they don't want to. So it's really important that we learn how to delegate and then focus our energy on those things that we actually want to do, because it'll be easier to motivate us ourselves when we focus on that. Another piece is getting organized. With ADHD, we need systems, we need tools, we need ways of organizing our lives that help us be able to get stuff done. Otherwise, it's just like utter chaos. And we need to lean into the different things we notice about ourselves. Some of these are common. Like a lot of us are out of sight, out of mind. So if we're not thinking about it, or we're not seeing it, then we're not thinking about it. So for me, I have a little stand-up note card box. It's actually in my free giveaway, which make sure you check out my TikTok and Instagram for that giveaway. I'll put the link in the show notes for my TikTok and Instagram so you can make sure you sign up for that. But it's this little wooden box that holds some blank note cards, but then one of them can stand up. And on that, I put my top 3 tasks for the day. So it's right there in my sight. It makes it a lot harder to be like, oh, I'll just respond to this email, and oh shoot, I'm not doing email 0 today. There's emails everywhere, and then decide suddenly to clean out my email box, right? Which is not what we want to do if we have real tasks that we need to get done on that list. So some of it is knowing those common things. The out of sight, out of mind thing is a really common one. And then also noticing things that might be unique to you. And because I don't know you, I can't tell you what those are. But I know, like, for me, I know that I'm not every week am I going to be able to put my laundry away, like my clean laundry. I know that there is no way every single week I'm going to be able to get myself to do that. It's like not going to happen. I do have in my head that I need to do it every other week. And what motivates me to do that is I feel anxious and all over the place if I don't, because then I'm digging through the laundry basket looking for socks. I know I could buy more socks, but at some point that just becomes expensive and wasteful. So anyway, so knowing this about myself, that I am not going to get that laundry put away, which might be your thing too, I created a spot for the laundry basket with my clean clothes to go that's close to my bedroom. It's actually, I have this like little shelf thing, probably doesn't matter, but I have this little shelf thing that's got the pull out laundry bin things. It's a double one, so I can put some of them here, some of them there. I don't separate by colors. I separate by warmth. Like if I want something to be washed that's more hot or warm, I put it in this one. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I have that bin, and on top of it, I put my laundry basket. And so that way, it's a spot for it to go. So it doesn't just feel like this heaping mess in the middle of my bedroom, which really there isn't room for. So it would be in the middle of my living room. So if we can know our tendencies and organize ourselves around that, then it's going to be a lot easier to get ourselves to do stuff because we won't be overwhelmed by the clutter. All right, y'all, that was 5 things we need to do. I'll run through them once again. A piece of it is getting out of our own way, and instead of fighting our ADHD or feeling like we're bad because of it, shifting our mindset. The next one is regulating our nervous system and emotions. The next one is being able to get ourselves to focus, and some of that involves prioritizing. Step 4 is boundaries, internal and external. And the last one is getting ourselves to do stuff. I hope this was helpful. I'd love to hear in the comments what resonated with you. And even if you're like, that doesn't fit for me, Jen, I'd love to hear that too. Make sure you follow this podcast, and I'll see you next time.